It is one of history's most terrifying mysteries, a puzzle solved only by a forbidden thought. What if Napoleon's Grande Armée never froze? Consider the moment the map of Europe fractured, when Moscow did not burn, but instead became the new beating heart of an unstoppable, sprawling French Empire. That cataclysmic shift would have shattered the world we know today, erasing centuries of history with one single, decisive, and terrifyingly successful invasion. We begin our journey in the biting, relentless cold of 1812, a winter that traditionally buried empires and decided the fate of nations. The Grande Armée, a force of nearly 700,000 soldiers, has just achieved the impossible, the complete, total capitulation of the vast Russian state. The scorched earth policy, that desperate, last-ditch strategy of Tsar Alexander I, was not just countered, it was utterly and totally crushed by Napoleon's strategic brilliance. Moscow, rather than a smoldering trap, stands intact, its massive stone structures now retrofitted as an impenetrable, reinforced winter fortress. From this conquered citadel, Napoleon, a master of logistics, manages to secure his vast, fragile supply lines stretching across all of Europe. He does not just occupy the city, he establishes a parallel, functional Russian government, placing a puppet ruler on the throne and executing all prominent resistors. With Russia neutralized, the entire balance of continental power shifts dramatically, an tectonic event that echoes throughout the empty corridors of every European palace. France is now the undisputed, absolute master of Europe, its influence sprawling from the rugged Atlantic coast all the way to the Ural Mountains. The focus immediately and terrifyingly turns westward, across the English Channel, to the stubborn, isolated island nation that has long resisted Napoleon's grand continental vision. Britain, stripped of its crucial ally in the East and its vital trading partners, faces a truly catastrophic economic collapse and the imminent threat of a massive invasion. The continental system, that grand economic blockade, is no longer a leaky, porous sieve, but a watertight, strangling, inescapable economic reality. The British pound plummets, inflation spirals completely out of control, and a desperate, resource-starved populace demands peace at any cost. Without British funding to support any further continental resistance, the Iberian Peninsula, where British forces had been fighting a long, draining war, falls quickly to complete French control. The Duke of Wellington, deprived of reinforcements, is forced to execute a humiliating, desperate evacuation, leaving the entire peninsula to French administration. A terrifyingly professional, battle-hardened Grande Armée, now freed from the long Russian campaign, moves systematically to secure the borders of Napoleon's vast, new, and truly immense empire. In the long term, the very map of Europe is radically and permanently redrawn, but not as the fractured, competing quilt of nation-states we recognize today. Napoleon's long-held ambition was never just conquest, it was also administrative consolidation, the homogenization of vast populations under a single, efficient, rationalized system. We would likely see the creation of a massive United States of Europe, a centralized powerhouse governed from Paris, built on the foundations of the revolutionary Code Napoleon. This code, a uniform set of laws, is implemented universally, fundamentally standardizing everything from private property rights to civil law across the entire continent. The metric system becomes truly global, not just a European oddity. Internal trade barriers are completely abolished, creating a single, massive, integrated market that stretches from Lisbon to Moscow. A single standardized currency, perhaps the Napoleonic franc, replaces the dozens of competing, confusing currencies, streamlining entire continental economies. The social impacts are equally dramatic and profound. The ancient power of the entrenched, centuries-old aristocracy is completely, utterly, and ruthlessly broken, replaced entirely by a strict, state-mandated meritocracy.
Standardized state-run education becomes the absolute norm, molding subsequent generations in the values and philosophies of the conquering French Empire. But this seeming stability hides a darker, much more dangerous undercurrent of profound social control and perpetual systematic repression. A uniform, hyper-efficient police state patterned after the intricate networks of Napoleon's own intelligence apparatus spreads its surveillance web over every town and village. Freedom of the press, a dangerous revolutionary ideal, is brutally suppressed across the entire continent. Dissent is methodically hunted down and erased before it can ever truly bloom. Nationalism, the very powerful force that would later define the 19th and 20th centuries, is either ruthlessly crushed in its infancy or brilliantly co-opted. A carefully managed imperial patriotism is promoted, with citizens taught to pledge their absolute loyalty to the empire, not to their separate languages or regional histories. Without the unifying threat of a hostile expansionist Napoleon, Germany and Italy would never have seen the strong nationalistic movements that later unified them as single nations. In fact, a dominant, overarching French Empire might have proactively discouraged such large potential rival states from ever forming, keeping Central Europe intentionally fragmented. Poland, however, might have emerged as a powerful autonomous kingdom, a crucial buffer state and highly valued ally on the empire's far eastern border, a rewarding outcome for their loyal support. The French language, not the upstart English, solidifies its position as the undisputed global lingua franca of diplomacy, science, commerce, and culture. The geopolitical ripple effects cross the Atlantic, dramatically reshaping the history of the entire Western Hemisphere as well. A dominant Napoleon, flush with the massive resources of a conquered continent, would almost certainly look to regain and then massively expand France's lost colonial empire. The massive Louisiana territory, which he sold to the young United States to fund his wars, might never have been relinquished, dramatically halting American expansion. This would place a massive, powerful, expansionist French state directly on the border of the ambitious young United States, setting the stage for decades of intense conflict. This brings us to a crucial, terrifying realization. In this alternate world, the defining conflicts of the 20th century, the global ideologically driven world wars, might never have happened. Without a strong, unified, and aggressive German nation, the intricate web of interlocking alliances that triggered the First World War would never have been woven. And without that devastating global conflict, the conditions that gave rise to fascism and communism and the subsequent horrors of World War II might never have been created. Instead, we might have seen decades of smaller imperial police actions, or perhaps a singular decades-long Cold War between the immense French Empire and a desperate, isolated British naval power. The very pace of technological advancement would be different, perhaps faster in fields critical to centralized imperial control, but slower in areas driven by competitive, nationalistic scientific rivalries. A Europe unified under French dominance would have been an unmatched center of scientific development, a singular, massive engine driving research in everything from metallurgy to medicine. However, this progress would likely have been carefully directed, prioritizing military applications and internal surveillance technology, a starkly different focus than our own modern era. What a truly unsettling alternate history we have glimpsed, a world without the nations we know, a world defined by a single dominating continental superpower. We must grapple with the profound idea that our familiar present is the result of countless contingent moments, some as simple and random as the weather in the Russian winter. The historical path we know was forged not by inevitable destiny, but by the complex interactions of brilliant generals, desperate politicians, and the unpredictable, uncaring forces of nature itself. To imagine a successful Napoleon is to realize that the values we hold dear, national sovereignty, individual liberty, democratic governance, were by no means preordained or universally inevitable. This hypothetical reality terrifying and orderly in equal measure, reminds us that the flow of history can be redirected by a single decisive moment or a crucial error. We're left to wonder if the long-term stability and scientific progress of a unified Napoleonic Europe would have been worth the cost of absolute suppression and a profound loss of cultural and national identity. Our exploration of what if is just beginning, and your voice is a critical part of this fascinating journey. What specific detail from this drastically altered Napoleonic reality do you find the most profoundly disturbing, or perhaps surprisingly beneficial for the human race? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll feature the most thought-provoking analysis in our upcoming special Q&A episode next month. To continue unlocking these hidden dimensions of human history and discovering the dramatic what-ifs that nearly defined our existence, we warmly invite you to join our growing community of history explorers. Please subscribe now and click the notification bell so you will never miss a moment of our deep, immersive journeys into the worlds that almost were. Your curiosity is the true engine of our historical investigation. Thank you profoundly for your time and your engagement. Join us next week as we ask with cinematic suspense, what if the Roman Empire had never fallen and industrialized centuries early, changing everything?